Okay, the third full paragraph on page 44, talking about not being easy to face this dichotomy between an alcoholic death and life on a spiritual basis. And it goes on to say, but it isn't so difficult. About half our original fellowship were of exactly that type. At first, some of us tried to avoid the issue. Hoping against hope, we were not true alcoholics. But after a while, we had to face the fact that we must find a spiritual basis of life, or else. That's kind of interesting, too, if you stop to think about it. There are 62 or 63 or 64 musts in the first 164 pages. Somebody counted them. I think that's probably right. But must in the big book means or else. It doesn't mean, oh golly gee whiz, it'd be kind of sort of nice if we sort of kind of like did it. Means exactly what it says. Perhaps it's going to be that way with you, but cheer up. Something like half of us thought we were atheists or agnostics. Our experience shows that you need not be disconcerted. Now these next paragraphs, these next three paragraphs, are some of the most important in the big book. And lay a foundation. This is all basic stuff. And one of the things that we find as we go through sobriety and go through the program and reach a spiritual awakening is that, especially when we're working with others, we need to constantly go back to basics, the basic stuff here. That we're alcoholics, that we cannot stop drinking on our own, that alcoholism is a deadly, incurable, progressive illness, and that we have no power over alcohol, and that therefore we're doomed to an alcoholic death if we are unable to stop drinking, which we cannot do on our own. So let's see now what this really means. At the bottom of page 44, if a mere code of morals or a better philosophy of life were sufficient to overcome alcoholism, many of us would have recovered long ago. But we found that such codes and philosophies did not save us, no matter how much we tried. We could wish to be moral, we could wish to be philosophically comforted. In fact, we could will these things with all our might, but the needed power wasn't there. Here's the rule. Our human resources, as marshaled by the will, were not sufficient. They failed utterly. This is so basic to our understanding of what in the world we're doing here, and what's the purpose of all this, and why we go through these steps, and why do we show up at meetings all the time and help other people? Why do we pray? Why do we meditate? Our human resources, as marshaled by the will, fail utterly. The opposite of that, of course, is that then, therefore, we must have a higher power in our lives. And let's see what this says, this next paragraph. Lack of power. That was our dilemma. Oh, but wait a minute now. We thought when we came in here, our problem was we drank too much, or you said we're an alcoholic and we have the disease of alcoholism. That's got to be our problem. So if we just don't drink, we'll be okay, right? Wrong. Because alcohol is not our problem. This is a hard one to get across, and especially with so much of the stuff we hear these days, as if alcohol was the bottom line, the sine qua non of why we're here. It's not. Our problem is that we don't have any power. And the solution is we have to find a power by which we can live. And that means, by the way, as opposed to die. And it had to be a power greater than ourselves. And that's, by the way, that power is capitalized. When it's capitalized, it means that the book is talking about a deity, not a ashtray, doorknob, pickup truck, or an AA group. We're talking about a deity. We have to find a power greater than ourselves. This is the second shortest sentence in the big book, obviously. There are 9 letters in there. There's one sentence that has only 8. A little bit of AA trivia. Obviously, it's not so darn obvious to most of us when we first read this. What are you saying? That in order for me to live as opposed to die, I have to find a power greater than myself? Okay, then where am I supposed to find this power? Well, that's what the book says, but where and how are we to find this power? Now let's look at this next sentence. We've got to remember what it is we're reading here, what this book is doing. Well, that's exactly what this book is about. It's about where and how to find this power, isn't it? Its main object is to enable you to find a power greater than yourself which will solve your problem. And read that, problems. Because the truth of the matter is that what we find in this big book will work with all human problems. There is nothing that happens to us which is a problem for us which is beyond God's power. The moment we begin to put limitations on His power, we begin to put limitations on our own recovery. People who talk about, oh, God doesn't take away all our defects, ha ha ha, kind of smirk, wink, 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 and then we get to have them around for quite a while. God's got this sense of humor. He lets us have lust and lets us suffer with it for a while, and jealousy and all these things. That's why we have a 10th step, they say. Wrong. Got nothing to do with the 10th step. 10th step recognizes the fact that these things will recur because we are out there in the world being constantly faced with the things of the world and the things of the flesh. And because we feel threatened by those things. And because threat equals fear, and fear means the recurrence, the cropping up of defects that God has already removed from us, the ones we brought in with us. We're going to constantly have to watch for fear and dishonesty and selfishness and resentments as they come up, and we take care of them on the spot. That's what the 10th step is for. But so many of us make the mistake of putting limitations on God's power. First, in this 2nd step that we're talking about right now, we come to ascribe to God all power, and we come to believe that He can restore us to sanity. And then later, as we work the steps, we fall prey to the idea that somehow He's going to do that. Oh, yeah, He can, but, He doesn't. And so we just have to sort of go along with that, and we just never say never, and all of that stuff. We need to put those ideas out of our minds, not because somebody else wrote them or thinks them, but because for ourselves, it's imperative that we recognize that we must be consistent. Either God has all power or He has none. Either He's going to restore us to sanity or can restore us to sanity or He can't. Either He will remove from us those things which block us from Him or He won't. We have to be real careful not to limit God's power working in our lives by limiting His power in our thinking and our actions. And so this book is about its main object to enable us to find this power which will solve our problem. And that means we have written a book which we believe to be spiritual as well as moral. And it means, of course, that we're going to talk about God. Whoa, can't do that. Don't talk about God around here, especially there might be some newcomers in the room. They're going to get up and run out screaming, don't talk to me about God, I'm out of here. One of the most amazing things to me is that when we are directed, when we're working with somebody new, not only to tell them how we drank and what happened to us when we drank, but how we tried to stop and couldn't. And then we tell them about the disease and what that means. And then we're to tell them how we recovered. Now, how do you go about telling somebody how you recovered if you have been working the steps and leave God out? God starts right there in the 2nd step, doesn't He? And all the way through. What are you going to do? You're going to lie to somebody by omission? How are we going to describe working these steps without God? I don't believe it can be done. And so every time we hear this, Don't talk to me about, don't make the mistake of talking about God. What people may be saying is don't get spiritually arrogant. Don't believe that you have the last word about God, because probably you don't. The last word may be the last word for you, but not necessarily for the next person. And here we honor everybody's conception of God, whatever it may be. But the book makes no bones about it, and never once do we find in the big book any substitute for God. We find those substitutes in other literature in our program, but not in the big book. How in the world do you find a substitute for God anyway? Did you ever see anybody get down in front of an AA group and get on their knees and start praying? The same person says the AA group is my higher power. That's fine, but don't put capital letters on it. It's not a deity. And to ascribe to the group the power to restore anybody to sanity is ludicrous. Or that the group has the power to take away defects of character is ludicrous. Or that we're going to commit our lives and our wills into the power of the group is ludicrous. And so we may find for a time the solace of being associated with people who already have a spiritual life that they're leading and can lead us along the same path, and that's wonderful. But the power greater than ourselves is a deity. That is, if we believe the big book. And I do. Here difficulty arises with agnostics. Many times we talk to a new man and watch his hope rise as we discuss his alcoholic problems and explain our fellowship. But his face falls when we speak of spiritual matters, especially when we mention God, for we have reopened a subject which our man thought he had neatly evaded or entirely ignored. And why? Well, generally I think we're going to find as we work with new people, maybe in our own experience, that this evasion or an ignoring of the idea of God really arises out of our fears and our guilt. Our fear of being punished for what we've done, our guilt for the things we've done, our feeling that we perhaps have lost any right to appeal to God, to petition Him. We've been running from God, many of us, for a long time before we ever get here, and we don't want to hear anything about God. And yet, as we listen to others who have recovered, we begin to understand that they have relied upon God for their recovery. And then we begin to understand that nobody is going to cram their version or AA's version of God down anybody's throat. Just the opposite. What we're really saying is you experience God for yourself. And this will tell you what your belief ought to be, and we'll help you to do that. We know how he feels. We've shared his honest doubt and prejudice. Some of us have been violently anti-religious. Of course, that's another reason, for the apparent agnosticism of many. It really is anti-religion, not anti-God. And many religions have turned on the people who believed in them. Not necessarily because of the religion, but because the people who believed in them were not able to live up to their precepts and to the principles they taught. There are many, many people in here who identify themselves, for example, as recovering Catholics. In fact, we used to call AA CIA, Catholic Irish Alcoholics, because there were so many people who were Catholic. And yet, the whole idea of being anti-religious, if you translate that into anti-God, it doesn't fit, does it? Because religion and God are not the same. If they were, if religion and God were the same, wouldn't we have about 1,000 different gods? We'd not be dealing with a monotheistic religion in most cases. We'd be dealing with a polytheistic. We'd be back in ancient Rome and Greece, where we had all kinds of gods and goddesses with human characteristics. It was interesting back then, because the state declared that you must believe in those gods and goddesses. You weren't permitted to believe in anything else, and if you did and you let it be known, they got real rough on you. They'd kill you for that. Did you have your hand? Yeah.
Yes. And so I wanted to know, I had neatly evaded and entirely ignored the spiritual God in my life.
Yes.
Being a Catholic and all that.
Mm-hmm.
And what I want to know is, so how do I do my push-ups to bring them into my life now, besides just, I've done the steps, I've done the meetings, I've done the prayer in the morning, but it's not anywhere where it should be. There's nothing there. It's just wishful thinking. How do I do the exercises to bring God into my life?
And are you saying that you have worked all the steps and did not have a spiritual awakening?
No, I haven't worked them all. No, just.
Oh, okay.
Didn't finish them. I'm working them now again.
Okay, so you didn't finish the first time.
Didn't finish the steps.
What does read the 12th step? What's it say?
Haven't had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps.
Okay, these steps means what?
All of them.
Yeah. You're waiting for that God buzz. I don't mean to make light of it. Now let me.
I'm waiting to get the alcohol chains off. So how do we get the alcohol chains off with the God buzz, or how about just the God feeling? If we can feel God in our life, I don't feel God in my life at all.
Okay, you raised.
I understand work the steps, but is there exercises we can do in the morning? We can't do the steps every day right now if we're a beginner.
Okay, so let's go back to what the Big Book teaches us. I hope you're not under the misapprehension that meditation is only in the 11th step. Okay, so you recognize that 7 different places in the Big Book it talks about meditation, as if don't we all. It's almost a throwaway in the sense that there's no big deal made of it. It's as if we all meditate, and this goes all the way back into our early days in the society and in recovery. The one thing that will probably help you more than anything else is to read the 11th step thoroughly, the prayer and meditation part, recognizing that it's really talking to you about what you start doing anytime. And meditation in AA is not ashram. You don't need somebody guiding you. You don't need to blow up balloons and with all your troubles and let them float out the window or any of that stuff. You don't need symbols. You don't need symbols. You don't need candles. You don't need organ music or the crashing of the surf on the shore. And you don't need anybody guiding you back into your childhood to forgive your father. All you need to do is get quiet and listen. Because it's like this. You pray. I'm sure you do. Right? You do pray. If I were to come to you and I were to ask you a very serious question, and while you're considering the answer, I were to turn my back and walk away before you could answer the question, wouldn't you think I was nuts? That's what meditation is. For us, meditation is listening. We pray, and then we get quiet and listen. We say, God, show me what you want me to do here. I'll accept any answer that you give me. But please give me the power to carry out your will as you reveal it to me. May I do thy will always. And then we get quiet and listen. And when you do that, after a while, you will find that the answers come. That you will start to develop inspiration and intuition. And if you do it enough, before long, you'll be able to rely upon those intuitive thoughts. But you have to work at it. If you will understand that meditation is not something confined to the day, or to the morning or the night, it's all through the day. Any time that you're sentient, that you're awake, and you get jammed up, stop and say, God, what do you want me to do here? And then get quiet and listen. You will find that you're resuscitated. You will find that by doing that, you begin to develop a conscious contact with God. And I call it a God buzz, but you can call it anything you want. The problem that we all have at first is that we don't understand that this is a two-way street. When you do your third step, you formed a partnership with God. You ask Him to do certain things for you, but you committed yourself to do certain other things. And the way our program works, first you do what you're supposed to do, then God does what He promises. And you do what you're supposed to, then God does what He promises. And when you do your part, God is always faithful. But our program is based upon the actions that we must take. The rule is very simple. God is interested in us humans when we want Him enough. The third step, the third pertinent idea tells you everything you need to know. God can and will if we seek Him. Seeking is an action that we take. You cannot expect to sit back and have all this stuff just come to you. It comes only because you take the action of seeking God. That means working the steps. And we will receive the promises in due course and in due order, only because we put in the effort to find them and to surrender to God. And so your problem probably relates to what actions you are not taking rather than to what actions you have taken. You might want to think that through and check it out with your sponsor. You're welcome. Anybody else have some? Yes, dear.
I'm Jimmy. I just wanted to add something to you. Is that this is a we program and not a me program, and if you think that you can work this program alone, that will never work out. You have to rely on other people. You have to call other people. You have to search for other people's guidances too, besides God. When we work at the program ourselves, we're leading nowheres. This first step always says we agree, not I agree. And that was only one little thing that I want to add.
Thank you very much. You know, in the basis of this program is well stated in the 7th chapter on page 100, where it says in one sentence, both you and the new man must walk day by day in the path of spiritual progress. You see, it's always two or more of us walking together, growing spiritually. You may be shorting yourself there too. We're not passing any judgment on that, but these are things for you to consider. I can only promise you this: there is an answer to your dilemma, and it's right here in the book, and there's something that for some reason you've been missing, but you'll find it if you look for it. Did you have your hand up there?
I did. I was going to say, there were a lot of times in my life where I really thought I was doing the will of God, and it turned out to probably not be.
Yeah.
But I think that within the rooms, and like she said, it was a new program, you can really check yourself with other people, and sometimes God speaks to you through other people, and that often happens in rooms. That was what I want to say.
Oh, sure, that happens a lot, doesn't it? Now, if you all turn to page 87, we'll examine what she just shared, because she's absolutely right. Down at the bottom of page 86, last two lines. We are often surprised how the right answer come after we've tried this for a while. What used to be the hunch or the occasional inspiration gradually becomes a working part of the mind. Being still inexperienced and having just made conscious contact with God, it's not probable we're going to be inspired at all times. We may pay for this presumption in all sorts of absurd actions and ideas. Nevertheless, we find that our thinking will, as time passes, become more and more on the plane of inspiration. We come to rely upon it. Is that what you had in mind? Right. Now, it's interesting, too, because the big book doesn't leave us stranded high and dry, you know. Dr. Paul, in his story, which used to be called Dr. Addict Alcoholic, I don't remember what they renamed it. Dr. Paul said, I never sit waiting for him to tell me what to do. Rather, I do what's in front of me to be done. I do what's on my plate to be done. And I leave the results up to him. And however that turns out, that's God's will for me. And then we also have a wonderful escape clause. You may not know where it is, but I'm going to show it to you. It's on page 68. Beautiful escape clause here. Now let's assume that we're struggling with this idea of what is God's will for me. Page 68, the second paragraph, in the middle of that paragraph. We are in the world to play the role He assigns. Just to the extent that we do as we think He would have us and humbly rely on Him, does He enable us to match calamity with serenity. Now, that gives us the major clue, doesn't it? It isn't so much that we have all this great insight or these great and wonderful ideas, but the key is to leave the results up to God. And the moment we do that, we get ourselves out of it, don't we? So there's a simple way of living our lives. It's so beautiful, and it's so simple. And the people who are out there trying to complicate our lives all the time with all these fancy theories, let's go back to basics. When I get up in the morning, I'm going to look to see what I need to do today. I'm going to ask God to direct my thinking today, that it be divorced from selfishness, self-pity, self-seeking, dishonest motives. And then I'm going to go out and do my day. I'm going to do what's in front of me to be done. I'm going to do the next right thing. I'm not going to hurt another person, but I'm going to leave the results up to God. Now, if I do that, when I get ready to retire tonight and I look back on my day, regardless of what the results were, I've had a successful day because I've done what God expected of me. To do the next right thing, to do what's in front of me to be done, to leave the results up to Him, not to hurt another person. Boom. Now, what's so beautiful about this, you'll never meet anybody who feels successful who's unhappy. You'll never meet anybody who feels like a failure who is happy. And so we want happiness, joyousness, and freedom. Wonderful. Let's go out there and do the right thing. And you know, powerlessness doesn't mean that we're powerless over our actions. Heck, we were never powerless over our actions. We just took wrong action. We made decisions based on self. We went against our own moral and ethical belief systems. We did wrong, knowing we were doing it, and not caring many times. Every once in a while, maybe we were operating in a blackout. Don't give me blackout. I think we do in blackout exactly what we would do otherwise. We just don't remember it. And so it is our actions based on self. It's our actions based upon the fact that we have been playing God. And we're going to have to stop doing that. When we get into that third step, we're going to find out exactly what that means. That's an excellent question. I'm really glad you brought it up. I hope that we helped you. Good.
You did, James. You always do. Thank you for your service and your...
Well, listen, this is wonderful. Anyone else, while we got a couple minutes here, anyone else like to... Yes, ma'am.
My name's Kathy. I'm an alcoholic.
Hey, Kathy.
And I'd just like to say that God was able to start working in my life once I stopped having expectations. Because for the longest time, I always expected like a bolt of lightning or something powerful to happen. And it wasn't until I let that go that I realized that it was within myself, that inner peace.
Yes.
And that God was working in my life.
Yes. Good. Remember what Dr. Paul said about that? You used to be on page 449. And let's see, it's moved forward a little bit in the book now. Here we go. Let's, page 420, if you got the 4th edition. This is what he said, Kathy. Bottom of page 20, or page 452, or page 420. If you have the 3rd edition, it's 452. Last paragraph. I must keep my magic magnifying mind on my acceptance and off my expectations. For my serenity is directly proportional to my level of acceptance. When I remember this, I can see I've never had it so good. Thank God for AA. That's a real good point here. Very good. Yes?
My name's Lou, an alcoholic. Isn't that, like, when you're saying do the next right thing, isn't that tied into, like, resentment? Because into resent thinking, you know, when I'm thinking about something and it triggers something else, and all of a sudden I'm thinking, well, let me just talk about all the times that this happened. If I stop ask God to stop my thinking, and I do the next right thing in front of me, then I'm going forward, I guess, instead of backwards.
Sure. You know what? We're all plagued with the same thing because we grow up believing that history always repeats itself. And so when we see something that's happening now or may happen a little while from now, which is similar to or the same as something that was a major failure or problem in our past, our minds automatically shift into that gear and say, well, history repeats itself. But that's not true at all. Well, let's put it this way. Our past has no power over our present and our future if we do one thing, if we change our actions. See, it's axiomatic that if we don't do the same thing we did before, we're not going to get the same results. So it turns out it's all up to us now. Are we going to be disciplined and consistent enough to take right action, or are we simply going to give in to the inevitability that the bad result is going to happen, and then we spend our time worrying, distressed about that, and we bug the heck out of our friends. They got to suffer along with us on this. But instead, what we do is we write it down and we take it to God and we say, God, please take away this fear and show me how to do better this time. Because that's really the key. It's like we learn that in both in the 4th step and in the 11th step. That when we see we're off the path, we ask God to forgive us. But the key there is we ask Him to take us to better things. We demonstrate our willingness to do better and have Him show us a better way. And when we do that, it takes the whole sting out of it. It really works. Did you have another question there? Yeah.
Yeah, I'm Bob. I'm not Paul.
Hey, Bob.
When you talk about doing the next right thing, for me, I'm trying to make up for all the shit I did in the past.
Yeah.
French. I'm trying to do all the right things to perfection. And like I'm trying to make up for past mistakes. And it's like a stuck point for me because I'm not trying to just do it, but I'm trying to do it. I'm trying to make up for the past, I think.
Okay.
And, I can't ever get anything perfect, and I just don't feel like I'm getting it right.
Well, that's probably true, but you got to be careful not to use that as an excuse for doing nothing.
Oh no, but it's almost the opposite. It's like I'm driving myself nuts by wanting to get it done better than I'm capable of doing.
Okay, so Kathy, talking about expectations, I suppose you need to look at your expectations of yourself, huh? And you see, this is the kind of thing that's very easy to take to God. You just write it down. You say, God, and you write it down now. Make a little prayer. God, I've had a real problem here. I have expectations of myself which are entirely unreasonable. And because I continuously fail to live up to them, I'm in misery. And I'm powerless over this. I can't stop doing it. I need your help. Please help me here to look realistically at what I can do, but most especially to take my clues from you, God, as to what you want me to do. Because you got to remember that what you're talking about is being tied up in self. You're setting the standards, and you're making the judgment, and that's pure self. And if you stop thinking about that, well, you realize that you've cut God out of that equation. So you bring Him back in with prayer. It'll work.
Thanks.